So I'm nice to see everybody joining from lots of different places. I'm Abby Paterson. I'm a learning solution architect for Hemsley Fraser. I've been working with them for about 3 years. And prior to that, I've spent 20 years in the learning and development industry, working with big corporate clients, higher education institutions and universities, public sector. I've been everything from a facilitator to a learning producer, learning designer, and I'm now a learning architect. And I work closely with many of our clients and many of our team at Hemsley to bring different solutions to life. And we're hoping to give you some insights today into some of the things that we found which are useful, and to some of the research that sits behind this topic as well. Over to you, Ian.
Well, thank you very much, Abby. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Ian Klein. I'm SVP of Strategic Accounts. I've been at Hemsley Fraser for nearly 6 years now, but before then, I was on your side of the table. I was an L&D leader, a VP of Learning and Development at a global events and trade show company. And after having met Hemsley Fraser and used them as my learning partner, I decided to join because the company really is innovative, can do everything we say we can. And I've seen that now from both sides. In my current role, I partner with organizations like yours to help them better articulate and understand their learning needs, and then provide engaging, sustainable learning that really does turn the dial for behavior at those organizations. It's wonderful to be here. Abby, if you wouldn't mind now starting to share the PowerPoint, we'll go ahead and get started.
Absolutely.
And we're just waiting for that to come up. Of course, today we're talking about how to make learning a priority for time crunch teams. Let's just take a brief moment and look at what our discussion will be like for today. Abby, if you go to the next slide, please. Thank you so much. So in our time together, which is 1 hour, but we hope to shave off a couple of minutes here and there for you, we're going to talk first about what does time poverty mean? What's really going on here? As you'll hear from Abby, it's a much more nuanced and complex issue than we might think at first. There are quite a lot of things that are going on which make it feel for us and for our learners that there's less time than there was before. After we go through that and Abby talks through the research, we're going to talk about how you, in your roles, can help make learning a priority at your organizations and for your audiences. We may think that there's nothing we can do. We're going to give you some very concrete strategies that you could make people stand up for and take more voluntary use of the training offerings that you provide. And of course, we'll give you some takeaways at the end, and we'll open it for Q&A. Now, while we go through the webinar, of course, if you have questions, please type them into the chat. I'll be monitoring. And if it's something that's aligned with or complements what Abby and I are saying, we might address it right in the moment. Otherwise, I promise you, we'll hold that to the end, and then we'll get to your question as quickly as we can. With that, why don't we go ahead to our next slide and briefly, and this is the only marketing bit you'll get on this webinar. Just a little bit about Hemsley Fraser. We're probably one of the largest L&D organizations in the world with a global scale and a global scope. We provide everything A to Z for learning and development and professional development. We've got a wonderful library of content, technology that reduces the distance between your learners and what they need to know, and a wide variety of wraparound L&D services. And as a result of all that, we're able to really engage your workforce in a time where everyone has to fight for the barest bit of attention. We can help make sure your employees are engaged with learning. And our training really does create lasting behavior change and a demonstrable boost in performance. Over to you, Abby.
Okay, thanks, Ian. And time poverty is what we're here to talk about today. And I think it's the number one thing that we hear from our clients, and we run roundtable events and we're talking to clients all the time. And often this issue comes up. Our learners do not have time to commit to the learning. It's also something that was reported in a Forbes report in 2024. It's the top reason why people don't focus on learning. And at Hemsley, when these kind of themes start emerging, what we like to do is put our insights and our research hats on and go and dig around and see if we can understand the issue a little bit more, and also think about some strategies that we can use to help you guys, you as L&D professionals, and also help us when we're trying to solve these problems when you're talking to us. So the research covers a wide variety of themes, but I think effectively we're looking at the issues of increased workload. We're looking at information overload, much more than we've ever seen before. We're seeing an acceleration in the way that we communicate, and that's really having an impact on people's bandwidth and their feeling of capacity. So you can see here, 45% of workers are reporting that their workload has increased. 88% of executives worldwide say workload pressures is one of their top challenges. And all of this can contribute to our sense of overwhelm. And when we're overwhelmed, we can feel rushed and we can feel pressured. And I think that's quite an interesting aspect, because that's where we have lack of control. And when we have a lack of control, that feeling that it's running away from us time, and it's really impacting on our resources and our ability to meet the demands that are ahead of us. If that continues, that can actually contribute to us over time feeling like we're burnt out. And we can see that in the research. And the research, when we're looking at time poverty, is absolutely intertwined with the research on burnout as well. And so you can see there that 77% of employees felt burnt out, and 48% of workers globally are experiencing burnout too. And there's no surprise on that, really. If we look at the stat there at the bottom of the right-hand corner, if we're spending 28% of time on emails and 35% in meetings, that's leaving less than 40% of our time to actually do the day job. So where does learning actually get a chance to squeeze into that? It's a very difficult challenge that we're facing. And that's something that we're trying to solve. And I think everybody feels busier now than they did before.
Well, Abby, if I could just throw in there, what surprises me is that on average, workers spend only 35% in meetings. I always say, if I got paid by the internal meeting I had to have, none of us would have to work, because it feels like we are going back to back to back all day long in a way where when we didn't work virtually, we didn't really have 8 hours of meetings every day. And then that moment at about 5 p.m. when now you can start your work. So it's not just the research. I'm feeling time pressure myself. I'm sure you are too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can see certain organizations starting to challenge that and put strategies in place, such as not allowing people to schedule for the full hour or the full half an hour into a meeting. I think that's quite interesting. And we'll look at some of that in more detail. But does that resonate with you, Ian, as well, with some of your clients and some of the things that they are experiencing?
It absolutely does. So I work with many of Hemsley Fraser's largest clients, largest customers, and the thing I hear more often than anything else, it is impossible to get people away from their desks for learning, whether it's even a half day. The common time unit for learning is a maximum of 90 right now. We do have some organizations that do devote time for multiple day in-person workshops, and we applaud them because that together time is important. But getting people to feel that they have the time available to learn and actually finding those time, incredibly difficult, incredibly difficult.
So it'd be interesting to see how that resonates as well with the audience.
Well, let's go to the first poll then, and we're going to ask you now, who on this webinar feels busier, more rushed, more pressured at work now compared to the last few years? So who feels busier, more pressured, more rushed than they have in the past? Go ahead and click the answer here. Now, we're not going to see the results as they come in live, but in a little bit, we're going to show you what everyone's feeling. So we'll give it a good 30 seconds. I do find, Abby, that managing my free time or managing the time that I am not in meetings becomes more and more important, because if you don't grab that free time, whether it's do actual work, day-to-day work, whether it's training or whether it's just to think, you will lose that time very quickly. So how do we create that space? And what do you think of the answers, Abby?
So that's interesting. Yeah. So we've got 66% saying yes. I'd like to speak to the 2% of people that said no. I want to know what they're doing that's different to us. Maybe they've got some really good strategies. And sometimes we've got 32% of people saying that sometimes they're feeling more rushed or pressured or stressed than they were a few years ago.
Well,
So
while we wait for those people to type their answers in, if they'd be so kind, those people who don't feel pressured, if you can tell us a little bit more about that, that would be great. Abby, there's an interesting question I'd like to float here, which is remote work entails more time in meetings just to connect. How has hybrid work impacted learning engagement? I would, and Abby, please feel free to jump in as well on this one. I would feel that there are something we are able to, with virtual workshops, with blended programs, with other interventions, we're able to get quite a lot of engagement even in a hybrid workplace. But there is something magical, unquantifiable about bringing people together in the room. It's not just those water cooler conversations, it's really getting to know the people who become your support network. So I'd say for people who are working in a hybrid fashion, while it is possible to do a lot of learning remotely, we should create those moments for people to get in touch and interact together. That's the special sauce in learning from your peers, not just from professional trainers or from other educators. Abby, what would you add here?
I think that's a really interesting question, because I think what we started to see as we moved into this hybrid working space, we saw learning and development trying to almost be used as a way to encourage people back into the office. Let's put on a learning intervention in the office and encourage people to come. And I think at Hemsley, we started to suggest that's the wrong approach, because you can do that, but that's not the right reason to use the learning intervention. I think that's shifted slightly. And I think now what we're seeing is the trying to find those learning interventions where they offer as much connection as possible with people, whether that's virtually or in person. And it's not just actually in the discrete workshop. We're seeing a lot more use of peer connects, of peer progress review meetings, and they can be done in person or virtually. So I think we're seeing different things starting to happen. And I think we're also trying to think about experiences more than just a learning intervention. How can we make it feel like an experience, that's something that they're going to remember? And also, what can we do to layer it? So when they come together, we're actually making sure they're coming together with a similar level of knowledge. Maybe there's some pre-work, there's some insights, some reading to do beforehand to make the most use of that time when they're together, and of that travel budget, of course, because if people are coming together for learning intervention, it's not just the learning intervention. There'll be all that conversation. There'll be some connection outside of that. There might be a meal that follows afterwards as well.
Abby,
So
real quick before you move forward, another question. What if you're in the office where there are meetings, people are coming into your office to talk for a few minutes? I think that's a great question. We all have experience on Microsoft Teams of setting our flag, our activity flag, to do not disturb or away, or putting actual 2 hours of deep thought work, please do not disturb, in our calendars. I think, although it might feel a little bit awkward at first, you can do something similar in the workplace. I've seen it at some of our clients where they actually have red, yellow, and green flags at their desk, or you could shut your door and put a sign saying, please see me after 2 o'clock. It may feel awkward at first, but only until people understand that you're not being rude, you're not trying to avoid them, you're really, really trying to focus on some deep work, and you'll get back to them later. All right, Abby, let's go
I
ahead.
love the do not disturb sign on the door
Yep.
that I've seen in the chat. I think that's great. And I think the flags is also a really good intervention. I think making use of some of those booths, if you're lucky enough to have an office which has created more of those booths, I think that's a really good thing to use as well. So just going back to the research then and thinking about, some of the themes that we were seeing, we're recognizing that it is a multifaceted issue. So it's really difficult to solve it on just an individual level. So have you ever met anyone that hasn't said, I'm not busy at all? I almost feel like you'd never hear from someone that says, I'm not busy. Even my daughter, who's sort of 20 something, both her and her friend say they do impressions of their mothers, and that the impressions is, oh, I'm busy, I'm busy all the time. So we're obviously, as a society, almost, it's expected to be busy, and we glorify it. It's about being important and successful. And also, there's the aspect of that sense of achievement. I love a to-do list. And, I actually miss writing the to-do list, because I think I got a much better dopamine hit when I used to cross it off than when I do when I tick it off now on a digital device. Also, people can be see, you know, overworking and being busy as being indispensable. They feel like they can develop a hero complex, and you know, that could be something that they're trying to you know, position themselves in a certain way within an organization or within a team. And then there's also that aspect of, you know, not wanting to miss out. People can often overcommit just because they want to be involved and they don't want to miss anything. They feel like if they don't get involved in everything, that they might be overlooked maybe for that promotion or for that next exciting project that comes up. And then we've got some more of the kind of psychological factors and things that we need to kind of consider. I think that one that you spoke about earlier, Ian, about just saying to people you're busy. That's all about how we set boundaries and expectations with people, and we find it difficult to say no. I think as you know, as individuals, I think certain cultures find it more difficult to say no than others. I think in some cultures they're much better at saying no and setting boundaries. And I think if you know anybody that is maybe working in a therapeutic profession, I've got a cousin who is a psychologist and another cousin that's a neuroscientist. Do you know what? They're really good at boundary setting. They don't just do it in their workplace, but they also do it with their family. And I'm always super impressed when they do that and think there's something I can learn from that. It's not about showing a vulnerability that I can't do everything or I can't be there or saying no. It's about just realizing what my own limitations are. And we often underestimate those limitations, which means we overschedule. And then we're always trying to catch up because we think I can do that thing in a couple of minutes or a couple of hours. And actually, no, you can't. You need more time, you need deeper work. And if we're continually doing this, then we're creating habits and they become more difficult to break free from. And then there's the other aspect, you know, maybe being busy and focusing on certain things is easier than confronting some of the more difficult emotional or personal issues. So being busy at work all the time might mean that you don't have to deal with, you know, some more troubling family issues or, you know, personal situations. So it's all of these things at play at any one time. And I think that's why it makes it really hard to focus it on an individual level. And when whether or not people are busier, they feel busier. And all these things are at play. You know, all these changes in society, all these different aspects that are contributing to the way that we feel. So it's good to be able to kind of understand them and recognize them, because then maybe when you're confronted with them again, you can start to challenge your own perception of actually what's really going on. I think also looking at the research, and if we haven't said already, this is all included in our insights paper. So you will get access to this at the end of the webinar and you'll be able to download it and you'll be able to look at the insights. You'll be able to have a full list of all the research references as well, so that you can go and peruse them in your own time, should you desire. So the perception is that we're busier, but what is the actual reality? What are we busy doing, or what do we think we're busy doing? Well, a really interesting Harvard Business article was looking at the impact of distractions on our time. And in this bit of research, they found that people can be switching between different apps and websites nearly 1,200 times a day. And that might be your work websites and apps and portals and platforms and systems that you've got to use. And that add into that maybe some of your own personal apps and messaging systems and social media that you follow. We can be constantly distracted. And many of these systems, definitely the social media systems, but also some of the work systems, they're all designed to get our attention. You know, there's a lot of thought that's gone into their design. So they give us rewards, you know, they give us a dopamine hit when we're doing things. They're all designed to take our time away. So I think it's being mindful of some of these technologies are really useful, but also some of them can be really distracting. And I think it's something to keep an eye on. There is some other really interesting research out there that suggests that distractions are now an even bigger issue than sick days, that we're actually losing more time due to distractions than we are to sickness in the workplace.
Abby, if I could just add, I think when I read this, when I read our position paper and looked at this PowerPoint a couple of weeks ago for the first time, there's a bit of mindfulness here. I have been, since the moment I got access to the internet, been flipping back and forth, checking news and blogs and other sites repeatedly throughout my day. That's just the way I've always worked. But when you realize that these platforms are not meant to be a benefit to you, they're really just trying to give you dopamine to get more ad money, to get more ad revenue, all of a sudden it changes your relationship. It's not something that's made to keep me informed. It's not something that's made to help me. It's something made to keep me there. And even just reading that second paragraph on the left side, that's caused me to lower my social media use quite a bit in the last few weeks.
It's really, really interesting. And I think it's a really good thing to keep in mind. And I think you also alluded to that other aspect about going on do not disturb, or, how do we carve out that deeper time because we're being distracted and we're feeling busier, and we're maybe like flipping, and surface level attention is going into all these different things. So we're scattering ourselves thinly. It means we have less time to be productive. If we think about those 35% in meetings, 28% in emails, how much time are we actually ring fencing each day for that deep work? Now, I know you, Ian, do that because we've had this conversation, but there's many people that don't do that. So it's saying that, in another learning survey that was done in 2022, that only 60% mentioned that 60% said they're rarely able to do 1 to 2 hours of deep work. So when are they actually getting time to focus and get that work done? I think that's a real concern, because if we did limit the distractions and we became more productive and we focused our time and had that deep learning, that ring fence time to do that deeper work, then we might actually have and carve out a window for some actual learning and development. But I think for me, this is all really quite interesting, because I don't know about you, but when we speak to clients, I think they often come quite often with an idea in their head about how much time the learners can commit to this particular intervention at any one time. And I think it's something that we should be thoughtful of in terms of challenging, because I think quite often they have a sense of, no, they can only do 60 minutes or 90 minutes, or I've even had 15 minutes recently. But I think we need to challenge that at times, because if they're going to invest in the learning and development intervention, then it has to be impactful. It has to make a difference. And if it's just another short intervention that they're paying surface level attention to, then it's not going to meet or deliver the desired behaviors or expectations that they're wanting from it.
I was actually speaking to a company yesterday who described exactly what you're talking about as entertainment. And Hemsley Fraser is not in the business of entertainment. There's no point in investing time and resources if it's not targeted at changing real behaviors in service of solving a business problem. So no more entertainment.
I don't love the concept, but I love the description of entertainment. I completely agree. And I think not only should we be challenging the time that's available, I think when we're designing and thinking about solutions and interventions, we should be mindful of these things as well. Making sure that we're asking people to show up and set the expectations that we don't expect them to be distracted by other messaging systems or apps. And I think also thinking about maybe setting aside time within that training intervention, either in it or after it, so there is opportunity for reflection. Because if there's no opportunity for reflection, there's they're quite unlikely to then transfer that into the workplace, because they won't know how to reflect on what it means to them and how they can use those skills and those techniques in their own world.
Well, I think we've got another poll question coming up. So what we'd like to know now, while you look at what's on the screen, is how much time did you spend learning in the last week? So go ahead and click there. How much time did you spend learning in the last week? And Abby, I don't want to jump the gun here, but is it true you'll be talking about spaces a little bit later? Hemsley Fraser's way to create space for our employees to learn professionally and personally?
We will be talking about that. Are you going to ask me, Ian, then? Or are you going to expect that my answer should be between 3 and 4 hours? Because this is the new amount of time that we've been given in our diaries to focus on learning and development. And I mean, I love the concept actually, because we're a learning and development company. So I think it's great that we are drinking our own champagne and doing what we set out to do and help other people to do.
Exactly. And we can see here that for the majority of people, they did spend 3 or 4 hours learning in the past week. And I guess I have a question for everyone, if you want to put it in the chat. Was this company sanctioned time? Was this time you felt you had to sneak away from other duties, or was this on your own personal time? I don't think we had that in the question. I really enjoy our time that we're given, as you'll talk about in spaces. In fact, I'm trying to pick up piano again after number of years, and it's amazing to watch your brain make new connections, and even that learning helps me in so many other ways. Of course, professional learning as well. Here we go. A lot of people doing things on their personal time, while a few people here are encouraged by their managers using work time and scheduling learning on their own. This is fantastic. Abby, what about you? What have you been learning on your personal and professional time?
So professional time, I've been learning to use new bits of software, and I've been actually looking at what learning I want to do. So I've been doing some research on some different learning I can do professionally. Personally, I'm trying to improve my tennis game. So that's something I'm learning on. And also, because I was doing a triathlon event, I've also been learning how to change and pump up my own tires. So that's
Excellent.
something else I've been looking at.
Excellent. We do see, though, that there are 1/3 of people have less than 1 hour, which I'm sure means zero time. 1/3 of the people on this call say they have less than an hour to learn anything during a week. And we'd like to help you find ways to create space to do that. So let's continue.
Um, it was mentioned on the previous slide as well is that it was looking at sort of Gen Z, and I think there's some research that states that that Gen Z actually value the opportunity for learning and development much more than maybe people that were born before they were. So they really do see it as a way to advance their careers, and so that's why it's so important for them. However, from the research, what we have found out that for all generations, there are top 5 motivations. So personal growth and self-improvement, increase earning potential, because you just might be interested in the subject matter, because you're a learner and you enjoy learning new things, and to stay competitive in their job or industry. And I think with these motivations, it's really important that we keep these, we hold these kind of central, so that we are considering how to address and how to align with these when we are promoting and advertising and offering any learning and development intervention. So how can we make learning a priority? So what we are saying at Hemsley is that you need to tackle this from 3 different angles. So there's 3 interacting approaches that you can take that are going to help boost your chances of success. And this is all about giving people the capacity, the space and the time. It's about giving them permission and letting them know that learning does matter. And it's not just people paying lip service to it, that it's the outputs of the learning, it's the impact of the learning that matters, and that it's noticed and recognized. And you need to be creating great solutions, really brilliant solutions, which are available on a multitude of levels in a different set of modalities. And we're going to talk about these and how you can align with these 3 aspects. But I think fundamentally, what we're seeing is that leaders play a massive role in this. So leaders role model and show people that this is important. And if, as a leader, you can try and tap into that, human motivation, that intrinsic motivation that we all have, then you're more likely to be able to get people to improve and grow and also self-select to do the learning, rather than it feeling like it's something forced. So what we're going to cover in the next second half of the webinar is we're going to be looking at some of the solutions that we've seen which are really impactful. So we've mapped them out here. We're going to be looking at how we take people off the clock, how we limit distractions, how you engage with the managers, how we role model, how we can get leaders to role model, how we can link to career progression, how we can make visible financial support available. And then we're going to be explaining to you how we use our 4E methodology. So at Hemsley, we use a methodology called the 4 E's. It's about exciting, engaging, embedding, and evolving. And that's how we design our solutions. And we're going to talk a bit more about that and how you guys can maybe pick up some tips from that and use that in your own settings. And the things that we're going to talk to you about are actually examples from some of our clients. So going back to the research, I think in trying to address this busyness culture that we find ourselves in, one of the articles from Watts in 2023 suggested the strategies to help people move away from this was about forcing them off the clock. And this isn't just about learning and development. This is just to help you move away from that culture and the feeling of busyness. So force people off the clock. Reward output and not just that activity. Don't be a busy fool is the thing. And eliminate some of that low value work so you can make time for that deeper work. So all things that we've talked about. But how does that show up maybe in some of the client examples that we've got? Well, I'll start by talking about Hemsley. So at Hemsley recently, we have introduced a concept called spaces. So we're giving all employees half a day, effectively, often on a Friday afternoon, is for most people, to go off and do something that feeds their own learning and development. Now, this doesn't have to just be about professional learning and development. This is about the whole individual growing and developing. So it could be something that you want to learn and develop for yourself. It could be a new language. It could be in your piano. Anything that is helping you to detach from work, recharge, learn something new, and really flex those learning muscles is you're able to do at Hemsley. And I think there's this in some companies, they've been doing this for a long time. I think Google's quite renowned and known for offering employees 20% of their working week is to be focused on learning and research.
Abby, I think as you continue on this slide, it would be great to hear, surely Hemsley Fraser isn't the only one, but what companies do you work for that give you this professionally sanctioned time for either professional or personal development? We've had a little bit in the chat so far, but I'd love to hear more. And I think something that really works for us, which you'll see in the slide about getting permission, is that all of our managers from the CEO down, all of our leaders are absolutely supporting this initiative in every way, because it's not just about having the time, it's feeling you can use the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And forcing people off the clock. What's quite interesting, I find, at Hemsley, and how that we've done that, is that it's for the whole company is off the clock. So we're all off the clock. There's not some people just doing the odd meeting. There's no emails flying around because everybody's got this time. So actually, it kind of forces and makes you address the situation of, okay, nobody's working. So this is the time that I'm supposed to be taking. So it is a really good mechanism, and it seems to be working well. For Hemsley, the proof is in the pudding. We'll obviously see how this impacts employee engagement and maybe our learning and development scores towards the end of the year in our engagement and our pulse surveys. So I think that would be interesting to see. But yeah, we'd love to hear from other people. At one of the round tables we did in London, I heard from an insurance company, and they were saying how they do this, but quite often they do this for set job roles. So for example, where they're maybe working on shifts or in their customer service environment, they have that set time, but not all departments seem to have that set time.
We have an interesting comment here, which I'd like to address. Lisa Lam-Cadu is saying, I think this may work well for people that work in professional offices. However, the reality is different for frontline staff. Absolutely, that would be true. It's not possible if you're working in, let's say, hospitality or retail, for someone to be booked for 40 hours of work and then allow them to take time off. So we're not suggesting that this one solution is a panacea, is a solution for everyone, but in certain areas, we are finding it to be somewhat transformative. Yeah, good comment.
I think that's a really good comment. And I imagine they still have to do their compliance learning and development. So I think there's a good model. I don't know if it's a good model, but there is a model from the UK. So obviously teaching staff are frontline workers. You can't take them off shift. They've got classes to teach. And many years ago in the UK, they introduced a ring fence time called PPA, so personal professional an administrative time. So you had a certain amount of time that you rotated outside of the classroom to use, and that was expected that you use that for learning and development or for admin tasks. So something similar could work for some frontline workers, but again, it's about selling the value, isn't it, to the business to make them realize what benefits they're going to get from that. Another one of our clients actually has, so these are an example of a client that they do offer virtual learning and development interventions. They do that, and they offer in person. And then for a certain community, they decided that they were going to offer them off-site opportunities. So they actually take them off-site for 1 to 2 days, and they mandate there is no distraction. So you can't have work emails. You obviously can have family distractions, but the whole focus is you're not dipping in and out for meetings. You're not looking at emails. You are limiting all distractions to be focused on this intervention and the connection with your peers. And that seems to be working quite well in terms of making sure people have got ring-fence time. Another example would be with an energy provider. So creating more capacity. Quite often the line managers are our gatekeepers of the time of the employees. So I think getting them on board is really important. And we've seen some great examples of how by briefing line managers and talking to them about the benefits of the learning and development interventions that these individuals are going to go on, helps them to reinforce that this is important and allow the time to be taken. And not just the time for the learning and development, but also the time for the actually doing and the follow-up work or the practical application of those skills back in the workplace. So there's multiple benefits we see from getting the line managers on board. But it's also about permissions. You might give them capacity, but if no one's reinforcing that message, and if you're not hearing that from the leaders, then people are less likely to pay attention to it. We're all social beings, aren't we? And we all want to be part of that tribe. That's part of our survival mechanism. So if the leaders and heads of our tribe are saying, learning is important, this is what I learned last week, or asking people questions about the learning, then it's valued and you're more likely to want to engage with it because the leaders are giving you permission and talking about it. In some of the examples we've got on the right, exactly that we have leaders coming into workshops, whether that's at the beginning of the learning program or whether that's actually just dropping into a webinar and talking about some of their own experiences. It can also be them just having ad hoc and informal conversations, but asking the questions about, what have you learned this week, or talking about their own learning experiences. We see that as being really valuable.
If I could, Abby, there's a story I might have told you, but I'd love to tell everyone else. I think this idea of having permission and managers understanding why learning is important, I can't overestimate how important it is. I remember when I was head of L&D, we had arranged for an incredibly valuable interactive 2-day sales training program. And in addition to being incredible, it was rather a large investment in time, money, and resources. We had a team that was excited to go. The day before the training, the manager of that team stopped me in the hallway and said, "What is this I hear about a 2-day training? My people are too busy. They're not going to be able to come." Imagine what everyone who's excited about expanding their skills felt when their manager just said, "Yeah, they're too busy to come." And we lost half of the attendees for that workshop. What your manager says and does creates the culture of the business, of the processes, and of the learning. So we need that permission to be explicit and shouted often and well.
I think that's a really great story. And I was at an event last week where there had been this amazing intervention designed and put on for their graduate population as they finish year 1 and year 2. But one of the senior managers came because they were not sure about what the value of it was. But having them there and seeing what the graduates were doing, and for them, he thought it was just a big jolly up. But what he didn't understand is the learning, the reflection, how they were learning through experiences rather than through a formal training. They're a technical company, so they often didn't place high value on human skills, connection skills, and soft skills. It was more on the technical side. But by being there and seeing how taking them off site, getting them to focus on something completely different to their day job, enabled them to make new connections and understand how working together as a team is really important. All things they couldn't have done in the office, and all things you might not have been able to explain to them had they not have been there. So I say involve leaders as much as possible in being a part of the training, attending the training, observing the training, asking about the training. All these things have a great impact on making a difference. Some other examples there of from a leading retailer. If you wanted to progress, it was expected that you had had a range of experiences in different parts of the business, and that you'd also attended a range of formal learning and development programs. So you couldn't even put in your request for, applying for that job if you hadn't completed the required expectations of the career development path. So I think that was quite an interesting example. And finally, we have a global manufacturing client. So this is quite a good example. Again, this was about people that were on shifts and they weren't in offices. So accessing and taking time off shift was a big key factor for this community. But so what they did is they gave visible financial support. So for each of the sites, the manufacturing sites, they had a budget available, and people could access that budget, not just for the learning and development, but to take them time off their shift and get their shift covered if they demonstrated how it aligned to a certain business objective. So if it was aligned to the development of the transformation that this company was going through, then it was an approved and recognised learning intervention that they could draw down money for. And therefore that encouraged people to do it because it was developing the individuals, but also at the same time helping to develop the business.
Abby, we have a comment by Brian Ress that says, what might happen if companies and leaders were more transparent about what our promotable behaviors are? I think that is something brilliant and that I've seen used to great effect in several companies, including a few that I've worked at. And what I mean by that is, does your organization, or think about what it would be like if your organization had a one-pager that explained what great looks like, what good looks like. A manager, a leader at this organization is someone who encourages their staff to learn both professionally and personally, carves out time, etc. When you think about that, when you put it on paper, you put it on a screen, what great looks like, that allows you absolutely to go back during performance discussions and say, you are ready for promotion because you have espoused the best of who we are, and you're acting in line with our values. So I completely agree with that. Yeah. Thank you.
I think that's great. And I think you see that in pockets, don't you? Not necessarily linked to promotion though. We've seen quite a lot of more companies of all sizes really focusing emphasis on career pathways. So not just competency frameworks, but the career pathways that go alongside them. And I would add to that as well, making it giving stories to it, giving examples, getting leaders to talk about their own career paths and some of the skills or some of the moments that have helped them develop and grow. I think that's really important to do.
Shelley Smith has also made a comment, sorry for interrupting, Abby, that and this is a challenge, as I'm sure Shelley knows. Sometimes we make all the perfect arrangements and then our executive teams put in all staff or a town hall or some other thing that just clobbers our previously planned schedule. That's another reason, and I'll talk about it in a minute, why exciting both the learners and engaging your stakeholders early is one of the key and challenging things to have a successful learning event, is making sure that those overbookings are reduced.
I think that's great. And I think we've had quite a few examples from you, from me, and from Brian and Shelley in the chat. Please do continue to put any of your ideas in the chat in terms of good examples you've seen of people creating capacity or giving permission, or even just encouraging leaders to role model how important learning is. We'd love to hear those. So continue to put those in chat for us as we move on.
And I'd say if people are starting a learning activity or people are beginning to attend some of the learning you provide, but it's clear they're not finishing it or they're not actually putting what they've learned into practice, alarm bells should be ringing. I always like to say, and I think back to a great movie, if you build it, they will come, is fantastic if you're talking about baseball, but it's not how things work in real life. Having the most amazing training program, whether it's blended, online, micro learning, even if it's text-based or paper-based, whatever it is, you can have the most amazing content. You can have the most incredible facilitators, and it still might not lead to the change you need and want to see and your stakeholders need to see. The answer to that is what we call our 4E methodology. Other organizations may have different ways of doing similar things, but for Hemsley Fraser, it's excite, engage, embed, and evolve. If you want to have impactful learning that gets people away from the desk into the learning experiences that actually causes behavior change, first, you need to not only excite your learners, because there are tremendous demands on our time. So we've got to really make sure that we're thinking like marketers, getting people engaged with what we're doing. But we need to get stakeholder buy-in as well. Before you ever launch a training program, before you ever complete the design of a training program, make sure you have as your champions, as your supporters, the stakeholders where the behavior matters. So here, there are some ideas that we've got on how you can do that. Do you engage the CEO to create a video that has everyone talking about this initiative that the CEO believes in? Can you provide them with direct meaning about what's in it for me? How will this training be important to growing my career, growing my function, making me more productive, making learning fun? In addition to what's listed here, though, I would say that what's also important is speaking to every one of those learners, managers, the department heads, the functional leaders, telling them what's about to happen, why it's important, but also inviting them to share their expertise and their information about how you can make that training even more effective. In the program, when I was a client of Hemsley Fraser many, many years back, I followed Hemsley's advice and we ran a stakeholder engagement plan. I can tell you honestly that when that program did launch, because every senior manager felt heard, because they felt involved, there were no questions about permission. There were no questions about giving people time away from their desks. And everyone felt that we built the program together. So exciting, both your learners and your stakeholders is part one. Part two is engaging people with really spectacular learning experience. Gone, hopefully, are the days of death by PowerPoint. And if you're going to bring me or you to a workshop where all you're doing is listening to someone read bullets off of a PowerPoint, you failed, because we can get answers in an instant through Google, through AI, through any number of ways. We need to provide people with adult learning theory-based learning experiences that allow them to share what they know, that allow them to learn from their peers, to test assumptions, to challenge what's actually happening in a live environment. And here you see one of the reasons why we believe in not only in-person experiences, but in learning cohort experiences, because it's not just what you know, of course, it's who you know. So learning done right, learning experiences done right, helps you build those networks that last not only throughout your time at your current organization, but throughout your entire career. I do love how we can create personalized learning and learning in the flow of work. First of all, personalized learning. There are no two people who go to the same learning experience who need to and want to get the same things out of it as everybody else. Everybody has their own reasons for attending. Everybody has their own needs. So how can you find ways to give them options between sessions so they choose just what they need to do? How can you provide micro learning that targets just their needs? Through our LXP and our search engines, we can absolutely do that. Learning in the flow means that we're not just waiting once every quarter or once every 6 months for a 2-hour workshop and then you're in the wilderness for the next 6 months unless you can take it again. How are you actually giving people materials that are usable in the flow of their work? Is it one-click access to micro learning? Is it an AI agent, a bot, a search bot that's within Teams? How are we getting them the learning they need when they need it? I also love this last bit here on the bottom left of that page. Can you learn together as a team? We have a service or a product rather called a session in a box or a training kit where we take snippets of our larger workshops, we package them up for managers to teach their staff themselves. That's an amazing opportunity because now your manager is not just the person who tells you when you're doing great, when you're doing poorly, but it's really reinforcing the idea of the manager as your coach, as your educator, and someone who you can go to for additional knowledge. So exciting everyone and about the learning ahead, engaging them with fantastic learning experiences, still only part of it. Because if you don't translate that learning to actual action and behavior back at the workplace, you haven't made the most of that investment. So creating action learning sets and leveraging performance boosters. Maybe these are either micro learnings or webinars that take place to reinforce the learning post the actual program. That's fantastic to remind people not only of what they learned, but also to tell them, no, this was not a one-off. This is a real thing that we believe in. Continuing the connection between learners, those cohorts that you spent so much time and money to create, continue that connection. We like to set for many, many programs what we call accountability partners. These are people who are paired up in the beginning and then encouraged to meet throughout the program and post-program to serve as supports. For time's sake, I'll move to Evolve and I'll say that this is something that many organizations don't focus on, but in the ones that get the most value out of the learning, they do focus on this. Learning, when it's launched, is perfect right out of the box. But is it perfect 6 months later, 12 months later, 24 months later, or 2.5 years in? Do you have to rebuild everything that you've done? I would highly encourage anyone listening to make sure that they build into their learning programs annual content and process refreshes, but also some clear metrics on return on engagement, return on investment to make sure that what we've launched is sticking and investing in the time and the resources necessary to fix and polish up anything which isn't working. I've got several clients that have programs that have been running successfully from between 5 and 6 years. It's because we've evolved it over time to keeping it fresh, making sure it's still relevant today as the day it launched.
I think that's really great, Ian. And I think there's lots of useful tips in there. And if we move on, then I think these are points of reflection for us all to kind of consider, as we're thinking about interventions and what initiatives we might want to set up is, are we setting up a learning initiative which is adding to the busyness, or are we actually clearing the path? We've given you some ideas there about different ways you can help clear the path, like thinking about the stakeholders and the people that you need to get involved and understand what it is you're doing and why you're doing it, because those stakeholders are the people that effectively are going to be happy about it if it's delivering the success they want to see in the business. So get them involved. You're all in it and aligning to the same goal, or you should be. And I think when learning initiatives aren't aligning to the same goals as what the organization or the team or the department is trying to do, then you're just adding a layer of business and people don't see the point or the purpose. So really defining your purpose and making sure it's relevant for people to give their time to. Giving them the capacity and the permission, again, your leaders, your managers, and we didn't speak about this earlier, but I'd like to say permission comes from, yes, your leaders and your colleagues and your people around you, but it also needs to come from you, the individual. You need to give yourself permission to do this as well. And I think, Brian, you put a great comment in the chat earlier around you are saying no to things because you're prioritizing the things which you know are essential tasks or skills that you need to develop for promotable sort of activities. We can do the same for learning. If you know that learning is going to help you progress, to develop, and to help you move through your career and make you be more valuable to that business or to any business ready industry in the future, then yeah, you should give yourself permission, because that is an important factor. We all spend so much time at work. We need to invest in ourselves and do things for ourselves, which are also aligning with, what we need to do at work that makes us more effective. And again, if you've got any other examples of strategies or approaches that you think are effective, please do share them in the chat or send them through at the end of after the webinar. We'd love to hear from them. We'd love to hear your examples of things that have worked for different time pressured learners. I remember Ian had a great description, which I remember using and hearing when I arrived at Hemsley, which is developing solutions for different time budgets. I think is a really good way to consider what modalities and what durations you can put in place. So I think we're coming towards the end of the session, and I think we hope it's been useful. But I think in terms of concluding today's session, we know that this is a complex task and it's facing us on an individual level. It's facing leaders, it's impacting organizations as well about how productive staff are or not. So I think what we really need to consider doing is thinking about how we can, as learning and development professionals, help people carve out more time and space, making sure we've got the right people involved to give people permission, and thinking about those solutions that we can craft so that they are limiting distractions and really promoting the benefits that are going to be returned to that individual and also to the business, because the stakeholders will also need to know that too. You can get our full insight paper. Again, I'll say it's got all of the references to the different points of view and insights that we've spoken about today. So please do scan the QR code or use the link and go and read the paper. We publish at Hemsley different insights papers every quarter. So if you like this one, or if there's been something that's useful, please, sign up and stay around and come back and check up in on us for new insights that we'll be publishing in the not too distant future.
And for anyone who hasn't actually looked at the chat recently, you'll see that same link in there for the chat. With just 2 minutes to go, we want to see if anyone has any final questions before we turn it back over to training industry. Of course, you can always reach out to Hemsley Fraser at hemsleyfraser.com. We'll be happy to chat more about these and any other learning and development related ideas you'd like to talk about. Any final questions? Well, now we're getting a lot of questions come in, Abby. I think we might need to address these after the workshop, but let's take a look at one of them. It'll be useful to hear about distinguishing career paths, journeys, and competencies. Clarification is worth doing for our team. Oh, it was useful to hear about. Yeah, it is. Sorry, it was useful. Thank you for that comment. And yes, we see another person here talking about turning to AI to find levers to create time. There are some fantastic time efficiencies that can be had through AI, which gives people more time to focus on those human skills, or what I like to call power skills, that we'll need in the workplace, no matter what AI does. We'll need people to be emotionally intelligent. We'll need people to give effective feedback. We'll need people to have challenging conversations. Wonderful. Well, thank you everyone for the time today. It's been a pleasure talking to you all.
Yes. I was literally, I was taking my own personal notes and I was messaging my team on some of these cool initiatives. So I had a ton of fun, and it looks like our audience did as well. So thank you so much. And
Thank you.
that, I do have some last minute things for my other friends who are still here. I do want to shout out some more up and coming webinars we have this month, and you can register for these programs and watch past webinars now at trainingindustry.com. And all of our webinars are pre-qualified for a credit hour by HRCI, SHRM, ISPI, and CPTM. So you can send an email to me or anybody on the TI team, and we will make sure you get those codes. Additionally, you probably heard me say CPTM. That is our Certified and Professional and Training Management Program, and that assists you in developing core competencies that will empower you to manage the future training needs of your organization. So you can find more on trainingindustry.com/training. And I would love to see you all in Milwaukee this fall for our 2025 Training Industry Strategy Summit. Collaborate with peers, industry experts, and thought leaders as you build, refine, and future-proof your organizational learning strategies. This is more than a conference. It's truly a working session for learning leaders who want to align learning with business outcomes. And we do have early bird savings available through the month, so you can learn more at summit.trainingindustry.com. Lastly, that evaluation survey should have popped open another tab in your browser, and we would love to hear your feedback from today's session. Thank you again to our amazing speakers, as well as our excellent sponsor, Hemsley Fraser. But lastly, I do thank you all for your time and attention today. I hope to see you next time. I hope you have a wonderful week. See you soon. Bye, everybody.